one more kind of technique I wanted to talk to you about was environmental quality surveys. I mentioned as we were walking through the Bemerton estate, or walking to the Bemerton estate, about changes in environmental quality, and also when we were in King's Cross we had a video looking at people who were looking after the environment in King's Cross, but I actually want to think about how we can record that and actually think about what the environmental quality is like. In your booklet you've got an environmental quality survey, so this is an example of it here. It's another bipolar survey like the perception survey. So it has the, this time it's +2 to -2, so there are the pros and cons and limitations of that. This time, however, instead of it being your perception, it's about what you can see. So you look around and you look at how well designed it is, what condition the building is in. And you'll notice with this environmental quality survey, we've split it up into buildings, traffic, open space and general quality. The idea being there that you can get kind of really quite specific scorings for things within those categories. There are also blank spaces, the idea being that you'll be able to fill in your own ones. Now, if you're doing this for your NEA, you might be like, well, I'm not really bothered about traffic, that doesn't fit into my NEA. Absolutely, you will pick your categories. You might find an environmental quality survey online that somebody's used that you could actually say, that works really well, or you might want to create your own. So that is how an environmental quality survey actually works. Now this time you will get a different answer to your peers if you do that, say for the classroom you're in, but this time it's because it is subjective. One person's +2 might be another person's +3. Even though you're looking at the same thing, you might score things slightly differently. So that is something to consider when analysing your method, or when kind of thinking about your evaluation and evaluating what you've done, and talking about any limitations. If you were to kind of do environmental quality surveys, you might think about kind of the sampling strategies you might use. Now, you could do it systematically along a transect, for example. You could do it using stratified sampling, where you might go to particular places, but actually, you want to avoid bias, particularly when doing this. And actually, for example, with the Bemerton estate, which we walked through in another video. You
can see a bit of it here. There.
You're going to want to get an overall view of the environmental quality, and this is somewhere where random sampling is really good. So with random sampling, everywhere has an equal chance of being picked, and you're going to think about your sample size. So you're going to say, well, I'd like to do X number of environmental quality surveys. Now, the more environmental quality surveys you do, or the more data you collect for whatever data collection technique you're doing, the more reliable your data. However, the more time it's going to take. So you have to make a decision about how big your sampling size is going to be to get as reliable data as possible, but to make it feasible and doable within the time you have. Once you've decided your sample size, you decide how you're going to do your data collection. So in the example of random sampling, everywhere within the Bemerton estate would have an equal chance of being picked to do an environmental quality survey. A couple of ways of doing that. One way of doing that would be to get a map, overlay a grid with numbers, and get a random numbers generator and actually pick those coordinates. Okay, there are other ways of doing it. For example, road names, putting them into like an Excel sheet and randomizing those and picking random road names and going to those road names. But it has to be truly random. Random is not wandering around till you see a nice spot. That's not a sampling strategy at all. It needs to be truly, truly random. Now, with the land use mapping we looked at in another video, the service tallies we looked at in another video, we didn't do random sampling. And we actually talked about one of the limitations of random sampling, which is that if you were doing your service tally and you went to randomly selected locations, you might end up somewhere where there's no services, or you might miss out some services. Whereas with environmental quality survey, you could go around the whole of the Bemerton estate. You could do hundreds of environmental quality surveys, but you can't do that. You need to get a subset, a sample of the area, and one of the fairest ways, without bias, of doing that would potentially be random sampling.